What's up guys, welcome back to my channel, and today we're going to be talking about how many points you need to score to pass the IMAT. So if you're interested in this topic and you want to come study here in Italy, stick in the video until the end because I'm going to be sharing with you guys 3 different scenarios you can apply in order to achieve that score. Alright guys, so here we are. I'm going to be sharing with you all my screen with some of the information that I gathered. But before we do that, if you like this video, if you like this content, don't forget to leave it a like, make a comment, and subscribe to the channel if you are new. That is what really get me going and motivate me to record more videos like this. With that said, let's get into it. Okay, so finally in. Let's take a look at how many questions you really need to pass the IMAT. For the ones who are taking the IMAT for the first time, this is one of the most important things, that is understanding the rules of the game. You cannot build a strategy without understanding how does the rules apply. So basically we're gonna have 60 questions. That is the format we have been seeing for a long time, and each question that you mark correctly will have 1.4 as a score. But if you make a mistake, you will be deducted minus 0.4. This is a way of kind of controlling the candidates from just guessing. You gotta understand that there's a consequence if you do not know the question, and maybe there's a benefit on just leaving the blank. So at the end of the day, the maximum point you can achieve is 90. That's like the top score if you do all the 60 questions correctly. And if you're European and you're gonna take the IMAT, you have a minimal point of 20. If you're below 20 points, you're not even getting into the list. Further on, just a quick breakdown of the topics you will be seeing in the IMAT and the number of questions of each section. I know it can change, it has already changed, but I'm basing myself in the last 2 to 3 years of the exam, and I believe that this year will be the same. I just want to call your attention really quick to these 2 subjects here. They tend to be quite easy, so it's important to take a careful look of general knowledge and logical reasoning. Also biology with 23 questions, that's basically 40% of the whole test, and chemistry with 15 questions. So if you don't like chemistry, maybe it's the time to start liking chemistry, because these 2 together can make the whole difference to your improvement. Finally but not least, physics and mathematics. I forgot to put mathematics here, but together they sum up to 13 questions. So it's not the end of the world. So speaking of cutoff points, it really varies from year to year. It's really complicated to say this is the minimum point you need to make in order to pass. There's a safe spot, and we're going to be talking about this, but it can really vary. For example, last year we had, for Europeans, the minimum being 54.8 points. If I'm not mistaken, for Caligari, but for non-Europeans, that was 49.3. Something that is valid to mention is that it's not because one university one year had a very low point that it will maintain the same next year. Actually, sometimes it's quite the opposite. If you're a non-European and you want to try to build a strategy to maximize your chance to get into one of the universities and not really picky, I would say there's a lot of other things you have to take into considerations into that, okay? Such as, for example, number of seats that university has, where it's located, how did it really perform last year, and a lot of other things that we could probably talk in a different video. Okay, so before we move further, I just want to highlight here that even knowing that 54, 49 were cutoff points of the last year, that doesn't really mean anything. Sometimes it can get higher, sometimes it can get lower. It really depends on the difficulty of the test. Based on the last 2 years, we have seen very high cutoff points. So for that reason, I would say that 64, 65 points would be the little sweet spot here that could guarantee you big chances to get into more than one university. So let's just break down some of the strategies, okay, in order to achieve this target, that is 64 to 65 points. All right, so with no more delays, let's answer the question of this video. How many questions you need to pass the IMAT? And the answer will be 43 to 44, okay? Considering that for every right question you get 1.5 points, and having in mind that you need around 65 points to be in that sweet spot of improvement, this would be the amount of questions you need to score. Of course, this can vary depending on how many questions you get wrong. So to see this a little bit more clearly, I organized here a couple of possibilities you could be facing in the IMAT. Not looking really deep into each section, you have here, for example, the possibility of not getting any question wrong. 43 questions and 70 questions skipped, not answered, will lead you to 64.5 points. That is a great score that can get you in so many universities regardless the year of the test, okay? I think it's really hard to see this as cutoff point, okay? So this is a sweet spot that will guarantee you the max chance to get in. Now, of course, as you start getting some questions incorrect, the number of correct questions will raise in order to balance that deficit, okay? So that means that for 44 questions answered, you can get 2 wrong. So skipping 14 questions and getting 65.2. Other possibility would be to get 5 questions wrong, so 45 questions correct and 10 questions skipped. This will lead you to 65.5, the highest so far. And following along here, we're gonna have 9 incorrect questions with 46 correct answers. This kind of put you in a position of a little bit more comfort, because it's totally possible to make a great score even knowing that you got 9 questions incorrect. But again, that means you're gonna skip 5 questions, and I know it's hard to skip questions, I know, but sometimes that is the best option. And finally, with 47 correct answers and 13 mistaken questions, this will lead you to 65.3. Each one of this possibility here could look like random outcome, but if you're really preparing with strategy, each one of them is a different profile depending on if you like to take risk or if you just want to play safe, okay? I would say that regardless of your profile, I think these last 3 possibilities here are a little bit more close to reality. It's really hard to not make any mistakes, and allowing yourself to get incorrect answers could relieve a little bit of pressure. But that also means that you're gonna have to have a better preparation and be a little bit more sharp for every single question. Okay, now let's translate everything we talk into reality. So I organized 3 different scenarios that, depending on your profile, you can fit in, and it'll guarantee you 65 points. So scenario letter A, we're gonna have the science specialist. So you can imagine why. Following that, we're gonna have the more generalist candidate, okay? So he's playing a little bit more like balanced. And finally, we're gonna have the scenario letter C, that I forgot right there, but would be the safe scenario, the safe path. So let's see how each one of these candidates can distribute their points and get into the same result. First scenario. As you can imagine, we are focusing more in the biology, chemistry, and a little bit of physics and mathematics. This is if you had a strong base in science, or if you're really interested in the topics and don't mind to dig yourself into it. So zooming into, we're gonna have a total of 46 questions. So remember, 46 questions allows you to make 9 mistakes. So the way you're gonna make these mistakes doesn't really matter. You're free to do them as you wish. But the important thing is to get it 46 points. And how can you do that? Well, biology, out of 23 questions, you're gonna have to score around 20, okay? So that means that you're gonna have to aim for perfection here. I know it looks hard, but once you're really into biology and you get into the details and little patterns you can see based on the less editions, making 20 points is not rock science. I can guarantee you that. There's a lot of good content out there that can help you. You don't have to buy expensive courses for that. I have recorded some videos and I will be recording even more. This is totally possible. Following that, you're gonna be focusing on 12 questions out of 15 in chemistry. I know it looks a lot as well, but I think leaving a margin for 3 incorrect questions, that's more than enough. The next topic here, I gathered the 2 sections of general knowledge and logical reasoning. So that means that out of 9 questions, you're going to be focusing on 7. This is good if your English is not the best and you're a little bit fried with those long tests. Okay, having a margin of 2 incorrect questions in this section is totally fine as well. And finally, we're gonna have the math and physics. Obviously, because we're talking about the science approach, we're gonna be focusing more on physics and trying to get the most of this area. Math can be sometimes a little bit challenging. So 7 out of 13, that is like a relief. So I think most of the people kind of fit into this scenario here. They're really into biology and chemistry. I'm not saying that it's easy. Biology, for example, based on the official information released from the last exam, people were scoring 15. So on your mock test, if you're scoring below 15, I believe you have a lot of work to put into biology if you want to fit into this scenario where you don't have to worry about math and physics. So let's get going to the scenario 2, okay? So this will be a little bit more balanced. As you can see here, we're gonna have 17 questions, so that already released some pressure from biology. Chemistry, we're talking about 12. Okay, logical and reading, we're gonna have 7 questions as well, but you won't be able to negligent physics and math anymore, so you're gonna have to look at them as equal. Now, there's a lot of strategies you can apply to sort these math and physics questions, especially the ones you have to do a lot of calculations. I would recommend you to take a look on these. There's some good websites, videos, and some books talking about it, because mathematics is problem for everyone. For example, I have a book here that's called Mental Math. It's very interesting because he gives some tips on sorting quickly some mathematical problems, but you can also find some cool videos and websites. You don't have to buy the book. Remember that these 46 questions correct allows you to get 9 incorrect questions and 5 blank questions. So this kind of released some pressure as well in general. And moving on to our third and last scenario, we're gonna have the safe margin. So I put it as the realistic approach because if you take a look at the exam of people that passed the IMAT, you'll probably see something like this. So let's expand a little bit these scores. We're looking at 16 out of 23 questions of biology. People are not graduated in biology biology, so making 60 points is very reasonable in the IMAT. 13 out of 15 in chemistry. Again, I was telling you that this is a great point and super realistic. I know this can look a little bit intimidating, but again, 13 questions is very reasonable because they're not looking for people that are graduated in the field. You're going to be seeing some very easy questions that a fair preparation will lead you into that. Now, I think this part here is the main details. We're talking about 8 questions out of 9, okay? So this means you're going to have to read carefully the text, get a bit more comfortable and familiarized with the logical part of the exam. So we're talking about nearly perfect here, but marking correctly around 90% of this section here is a lot easier than marking around 90% of biology correctly. In physics, we're looking at 9 correct answers, very okay number of questions. That means that you can leave some questions blanked or simply make some mistakes on this section here. So this configuration here will lead you as well to 46 points. Of course, you don't have to mark exactly like this, but just keep in mind that this approach here means that you're not going to leave logical and general knowledge uncarried. So you're going to be focusing on this area along with chemistry as well, but more or less they're also a little bit balanced. All right guys, so in conclusion of this video, I just want to highlight some 3 important points for you to consider in your preparation for the IMAT. Okay, so first of all, regardless you're approaching the IMAT, you cannot deny that biology is really important for the exam. It takes up to 40% of the whole test. So what you're gonna have to do is to dig yourself into the topic and not allow yourself to score less than 17 points. Secondly, if you're comfortable with English, I would strongly recommend you to try to clear all the 9 questions of logic and general knowledge because they tend to be the easy questions and it's not worth it to leave it on the table all those points. And finally, I would say be careful with your guess move. If you cannot narrow down the question into 2 options, I would say it's better for you to just skip that and leave that blank. Remember, you have 9 questions where you can just allow yourself not to answer. You gotta take advantage of that. All right, guys, so this is all for today. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if so, don't forget to like, subscribe if you're new, and leave it a comment. That will mean the world for me. And I'll be seeing you all in the next one.